Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the Sant Jordi Festival. I'm delighted to welcome the Swiss writer Judith Keller, who was supposed to be with us in person this month, April 2020, for the festival Neue Literatur, New York City's only German language literature festival, where we invite two authors from the German-speaking countries, from Austria, Germany, and Switzerland. But because of the virus, Judith will come next year instead. But in the meantime, we'd like you to get a sense of who she is and a sense of her writing. So welcome, Judith.
Welcome, everybody.
Virtually. So you were meant to be in a residency at Deutsches Haus for what, 2 months?
Yes,
so?
yes,
Yeah.
2 months, yes.
And for people who are interested, on the Deutsches Haus website, there's an interview with you talking a little bit about what you'd hoped for from the residency. And so I hope that that will happen when you do finally come. But for now, we're going to focus on your book, Die Fragwürdigen, which translates as the questionable ones. I've translated a selection of these for the festival, and they'll be featured. They're featured now on the festival website, and so that's what we're going to be talking about. These are short texts of a couple sentences to a couple paragraphs, in some cases a few pages, that are centered around 7 Zurich tram stops, and they tell stories of passers-by, fellow passengers on the tram, the unemployed, the overemployed, the innocent, the suspicious, young mothers, and confused elderly. What's interesting and fun about these stories is that Judith dives into the blind spots of language. She picks it apart, she looks at it carefully, she takes idiomatic expressions literally and unpacks the multiple meanings of various words. Her characters are hapless and far-fetched. They're always trying to find their feet on shifting ground. And much of the humor, as I said, comes from wordplay, punning, and exploiting the multivalences of meaning. So we'll start with the text that gives the title to the collection. It's called Casting. That was easy to translate. And so Judith will read it in German and then in English, and we'll talk a little bit about the content.
Yes. Casting. Ein Polizeiauto fährt langsam auf der Tramschiene vor der zentralen Haltestelle. Aus dem Fenster heraus mustern die Polizisten die wartenden Passanten. Meisten der hier Wartenden kommen nicht in Frage. Dann gibt es solche, die in Frage kommen. Es sind die Fragwürdigen. Now in English, casting. A police car drives slowly along the streetcar tracks in front of the central station. The officers scrutinize the waiting pedestrians through the window. Most of those waiting here are out of the question, but there are some who do come into questions. These are the questionable ones.
The nice thing, in some of your texts were very difficult to translate because of the ambiguity of the words didn't transfer into English as well. But in this case, the entire text centers around the word fragwürdig, which is questionable. What does fragwürdig mean to you in German, and which of the meanings and shadings were most important when you went about writing this text?
Yeah, I mean, würdig, it's an adjective, and it also means worth, no?
Mm-hmm. Worthy.
Worthy.
Mm-hmm.
So, we can use this. Actually, fragwürdig means you can put something into a questions. Normally it's used in a more negative way. So if you say this strategy is questionable, so it could be better. But we can use this in another way to say these people are worth to ask a question about them, or they are worth to question themselves.
Worth questioning to find out their story. Yeah.
Yeah, genau, to find out how they are influenced actually by language also.
Yeah, and I think the nice you build in the ambiguity of those meanings with the title. So the police car is driving past these people.
Yeah.
It could be, looking for, and casting suspends some of that negative connotation. In English, questionable is also primarily used in a critical way, but not exclusively. So in this case, that ambiguity came over in the English. But in some of the others were more complicated. For example, in No Papers, you play on the word untergetaucht.
Yeah.
And it's about undocumented immigrants. And literally it means submerged or below the surface. But it also means in hiding and underground. And it was long the standard expression for, say, Jews who went into hiding during the Second World War, or people without papers living illegally. And so I'll be interested to see, and what I like about it is also that you bring out the poignancy of the current refugee situation in Europe, but also in America, by emphasizing the aquatic aspect of untergetaucht. So maybe you could read the English, and then we'll talk about the different options of untergetaucht in English.
Yes. No Papers. A few years ago, Esperance fled over the sea in a boat. She didn't drown, but now she lives submerged or underground or below the surface.
Yeah.
And
so
now,
in the end, I chose underground, giving up the sort of watery aspect, but those were the three possibilities that were going through my mind when I was doing the translation. And is there one that appeals to you more than the others?
Yeah, I mean, it's underground is interesting because it has this under in the verb, so you can understand that it's actually under the surface. Yeah, like untergetaucht, it means you dive under. Yeah, and the word in the official word in German to say submerged, and untergetaucht, and in English you would say underground. And I think this would be maybe the best possibility. Even though I think below the surface is interesting too, because it stresses more this aspect of in not being visible.
Right. Yeah.
And you're
and of hiding. Yeah.
Below. Actually, this would be good too. So you are not drowning, but you are not visible after. Right. After in a living way, you are not visible. And I think it works both underground and below the surface.
Yeah, well, that's the problem with translation, is that sometimes you have to choose one. Well, you always have to choose one in the end. Yeah. What interests me also about your text is some of them are very funny and absurd and poignant, like I said, but there are others where you bring in a political aspect subtly, not too overwhelmingly, but there's one of your texts is called Extraterrestrial, and I think you do a good job in it of puncturing the complacency that the better off, the more comfortable in the Western societies, that their ability to evade responsibility for the economic, political, and climate change refugees who are living in terrible conditions in our various countries. So maybe you could read Extraterrestrial?
Yes. Extraterrestrial. It's impossible to cross this desert. It's impossible to climb this fence. It's impossible to cross the sea in a rubber boat. Those who saw him coming were blinded. From far away, he had shone like a never before seen star. But when he reaches shore, he's one of those wearing a gold space blanket. The people on the beach can't believe he's still alive and greet him a bit incredulously.
Incredulously.
Okay, incredulously. Greet him a bit incredulously, like an extraterrestrial. The farther away from the shore, the less they believe he was ever in danger, because if he really could have died, then he would have. It's not at all possible that he's still alive, and anyone who's not alive is impossible. Sorry about my English.
No, it's very nice. It makes it more authentic. It seems to me there's a sense of outrage behind this text. Was that in your mind when you were writing it?
Outrage is
just being upset about the situation for the refugees.
Yeah. Actually, I had a very long conversation with a man, a refugee, and he told me that he came actually with a boat, and so he told me that when he came to Spain, everybody wanted to make pictures, and were really impressed that it's possible that somebody can survive this travel, and it had something with this golden blanket. They used to be warm, so and then it was so interesting to me, and also very sad. It's like a bit with this to live underground, that at the beginning it's like they are a star because they did something really extraordinary, but then they lose this and they just get normal, and then it's like this fact that they are alive is not interesting anymore.
Right, in fact, it's an inconvenience because then they're in the way and they need help. Yeah.
To something impossible. What makes it in the like the politic is treating them like something impossible. So actually, they don't want them to survive. But if they survive, they are interesting. But then at the same time, they are treated like not human beings, because it's like if they didn't they were not the deal would be that they would die in the sea,
right?
And and it's like if they don't, they are made like
extraterrestrials. Yeah, they're very hard words. I should have thought of that before I asked you to read these various things. Well, it's interesting to think about how much you try to pack into these and how much you do pack into these short texts. How did you choose the short form, or did it choose you?
Yeah, I think it chose me. I was always writing short texts. Actually, I always wanted to be too short to make to shine what is not written. Actually, I wanted to pick something what makes visible what is not there, and then I always tried to make it more compact and to leave away what is maybe better imagined than said. Yeah.
Which writers have been most important to you? Did you gravitate towards writers who wrote short texts, or was that not so important?
There is a certain tradition in Switzerland with short texts, but I didn't read it actually so much. But there is like Peter Bixel, he's still alive. But even though I didn't read this text so much, I wanted to write in this short way. Actually, because I like this question, like Peter Bixel writes somewhere, he writes just one sentence and then he asks, is this a story or not? And I actually, this is what I like. I like to put something there and then to ask if this is something or not.
Right.
And then I have to decide. And but other important authors for me are Robert Walser and Ilse Eichinger, or Adelheid Duvanel. She's actually a Swiss writer too, and she wrote. She was actually very important for me. She wrote short texts too, but in a bit different way, not with wordplays.
Yeah, but there's actually, I'm doing a presentation on the St. Jordi website of short texts, and I'll be talking about Robert Walser and Adelheid Duvanel, along with some others, Klaus Merz and
really?
And Michel Leya. So anyone who's interested, please look around and some of your things as well. But speaking of Peter Bixel's comment, is this a story? Why don't you read Xavier? Because I think it's a wonderful story in 3 sentences. So it's down, you have to scroll down a little bit.
To read Xavier. Yes? Xavier always falls in love with a woman he doesn't like. With women, sorry. Xavier always falls in love with women he doesn't like. He never notices this while he's in love, but he does see it afterwards.
I think it's wonderful. I think it tells a great story about a person without actually telling much at all, but it sets up the whole a psychological portrait, really. And it's like, you studied creative writing in Biel and in Leipzig, and then you spent a year in Bogotá studying German as a second language or a foreign language. Was one of those experiences more formative than the others?
Leipzig was very important, and Bogotá also. Leipzig, yeah, maybe because of, you mean for my writing or?
For your writing, yeah. Well, personally too, because I imagine they're not separable, but.
Yes, actually, in Leipzig, I found very good friends, and we were, they didn't write short texts, but we had a lot of themes in common, like about like what is reality in literature? How do we didn't want to accept reality, and in literature we wanted to to do something which is more real than reality, and this was very important. And it was also important because they were so strict. So we were criticizing each other. And then I had like to fight a little bit to find out what I really want to write, and I had to get more sure. And Bogotá was very important to see. It was such a different reality, Bogotá and Switzerland, and it was like seeing capitalism the first time in a real form, because it was so extreme. Everything was really extreme, and it made things very more clear to me. And this was actually, I wrote a long text about Bogotá, about a lot of animals, all the dogs, and you could see a lot of dogs in the streets observing people. And this was actually important because I felt that I tried to get into the point of view of the dogs, and to think about human beings actually out of the point of view of animals.
Right.
And yes, this was actually important.
Well, sure. It's an outside perspective, right? So just like you're coming to Bogotá and seeing Colombia from an outside view, and Switzerland then from an outside view, it's the animals who are looking and thinking about German as a foreign language. Did that change the way you were using German or how you approached the language? Is that one of the things that made you, take words apart or build stories around specific words that have several meanings?
Yeah, I mean, I think to write is always to make language to something strange, or what I said about the animals, I could also say about language. What I'm doing is to try to go into the structure of language and to look from the language on the human beings, like with all these preposition under and after and below, and it's not. I don't think that it changed my writing, but it's always good to make what you feel as natural or normal to see as built by society or history. And it's always good to see that. But I try to do this here too, so it's maybe harder
Well,
to
I
do
think
it.
There's one of the texts in Die Fragwürdigen that I translated that I think captures that outsider perspective. Do you want to read Potential?
Yes.
And this is another one that I'm now having second thoughts about the translation. The word that you use is Möglichkeiten, which is possibilities. And I went for potential, but we can talk about that next time you're in New York. But what I like about this is, these big abstract ideas, whether it's possibilities or potential, have a way of taking over your life. So the distancing you do in this text, I think, is marvelous.
Yes, I read it, Potential. People say that Josephine remains far below her potential. Even she notices how she tilts back her head. There it is, my potential, she thinks, looking up at the scaffolding that extends metallically in all directions. Far below, Josephine can hear the wind shake it. She calls out, my potential, come down. I'd like to stay with you a while. I'm with you. I'm part of you.
Yeah, that's lovely. Because that whole it's kind of goes back to the Xavier story. There's all these societal expectations that get internalized, and if you take a step back, on the one hand it's anxiety inducing, on the other hand it can be liberating. So I hope Josephine ends up liberated from her potential and not always looking up at it. Maybe anticipation is another one that that captures sort of, things that people take for granted within language and outside of it.
Yeah. Anticipation. Muriel is one of those women. Others prefer to think back on that deal with directly in real time. Thus, everyone is grateful for the memories they will have of her, and so leave her with a certain sense of anticipation. Anticipation.
And leave her with a sense of anticipation. Yeah, and that's funny. I think it's very elegantly witty in the way it unpacks language, but it also, again, gives this psychological sketch, both of Muriel and the people who deal with her. So we've already gone over time, but I'll ask St. Jordi's indulgence to do one last story, perhaps, and maybe it will do the high time, because far-fetched women are a recurring theme in this book, and these women are always in search of high time. It's high time. They're looking for it. They're waiting for it. They're wondering about it, and that's another unfortunate habit. Sorry, it's another unfortunate habit we have of taking things for granted and letting the hustle and bustle of life take over our lives. Of course, now we have a completely different perspective on that. What was your idea about these far-fetched women?
Actually, what you said is also my feeling, that she's the only one who is really impatient, and she wants another time coming. Actually, now I think, but this is the first time I think this, that maybe she's waiting, all these people are waiting for the good story, because they have a life, but it's not a really good story. They are just built by their language, so by their circumstances, and they can maybe find some freedom in finding a distance to their language, but this is not a story yet. And this is actually, this far-fetched women is waiting for the time when there will be a better stories. So I read it. I try to. Yes, high time. Tonight, a far-fetched woman gets out at the underground tram station Waldgarten. A man wearing a uniform a size too large and carrying a flashlight gets in the elevator with her. Above is the warm night. A dachshund waddles past. The forest restless and sways back and forth behind the house like an enormous pelt. The houses are flagged for demolition. During the day, he fishes in the lake. At night, he wanders through the tunnel. Every night at exactly 1:31 a.m., when all the doors close, he set off from Schwammendinger Platz. He always takes 35,000 steps, but adds another 100 every night. The distance between the tram stops grows. The universe is expanding. He looks at his watch. It's high time, he says, and steps into the elevator. The door closes behind him.
I hope she gets her story.
Yeah, me too.
Judith, thank you very much for tuning in and for sharing your wonderful stories with us. For all of you who have listened to this conversation, if you would like to read more of these wonderful texts, there is a reader on the Festival Neue Literatur site where you can read a good selection of these texts. And please come to the festival next year when we have it. Thank you, Judith.
Thank you very much for listening to everybody. Thank you.